Hello everyone and welcome to another ride overview video. Today we are going to talk about one of the most overrated rides in the game, the go-karts. I often hear people say that it is very overpowered, but that is simply not true. It is a good ride, but it is nowhere near as good as most roller coaster types. Like in the last overview, I am going to start with the special elements and the stat penalties. The only special element it gets is the station, and I am not going to do a showcase for the elements like I usually do, for just that one element that every ride to the track has access to anyway. The stat penalties are a bit more interesting. The go-kart does not have any of the usual penalties, but it is one of the few ride types that gets a penalty to its excitement rating if too much of the track is underground. In this case, it gets its excitement rating divided by 2 if more than 3/8 of the track is underground. The next aspect I want to talk about is a first in the overview series, and that is the operating mode. The go-karts has two different modes, race mode and continuous circuit mode. In race mode, all guests will race the specified number of laps and the winner will do an extra victory lap. This is the standard mode and probably the one you're most familiar with. The other operating mode, continuous circuit mode, works a little odd because the go-karts is the only ride that can have multiple cars leave the station at the same time. In race mode, all cars leave the station at the same time, but in the continuous circuit mode, only the first car in both lanes leave the station. There also seems to be a minimum waiting time between two pairs of cars leaving the station, despite the fact that you cannot select a minimum waiting time on the go-karts. This limits the throughput to about 600 guests per hour. Race mode doesn't have a high throughput either, but with the shortest track that has 12 cars and just a single lap, it can still get a throughput of almost twice that of the continuous circuit mode. Continuous circuit mode not only has a worse throughput, but it also has far worse stats, making this operating mode pretty much useless. The only situation where it is better than race mode is if you have a track that does a lot of laps, but then you can just lower the number of laps instead. Never use the continuous circuit mode on the go-karts. Speaking of the number of laps, very often the optimal number of laps is just 1. It does get a bit of extra excitement and intensity from extra laps, but it's not a lot and it also lowers the throughput a fair bit, which is already quite low. Only if your go-kart isn't able to reach its maximum throughput with a single lap, which is quite rare, it is a good idea to increase the number of laps. Like other rides, the go-kart can have a maximum of 31 cars. The way you reach this maximum is a bit odd though. You might expect that you get 4 cars per station tile, as that's how many it can fit. This is not the case and it's closer to 2 cars per station tile. Here is a full table of how many cars every possible station length gives. Keep in mind that in Vanilla and Classic stations can't be longer than 12 tiles, meaning you cannot even reach 31 cars, for which you need a very long 18 tile station. You might wonder how many cars you get if you have multiple stations, but you don't have to worry about that, as you cannot even open the go-karts if you have more than one station. The last thing I want to discuss before I tell you why it is not as overpowered as you might think is how much you can charge for the go-karts. I originally wasn't going to cover this, but during testing I found out that you can charge a lot more than I expected. For a small design like this with a single lap you can already charge €9.10 for the first 5 months if you have multiple go-karts in your park. If it is the only one you can even charge €12.10. This is probably the highest ride price in the game compared to how much the ride costs to build. I believe that is all the important information about the go-karts, so now let's get into why it is not as good as most people make it out to be. The reason people think it is overpowered is that you can charge a lot for it and that the queue line is often full. The first argument is valid, and you can indeed charge a lot for small and cheap designs, but the second argument is not necessarily a good one. The go-karts is popular, which is part of the reason it's so easy to fill the queue, but the other reason is the one we've discussed before, the low throughput. Look at these two rides. One is a standard go-kart and the other one is a coaster with a much higher maximum throughput. The queue line of the go-karts is full, while that of the coaster only has a few guests in it at most. Despite this, the coaster still has a much higher throughput. If the coaster had a maximum throughput that was similar to the go-karts, it would have had a longer line waiting for it, but because it can process more guests per hour, the line is short. The argument that you can charge a lot for the go-karts does mitigate the low throughput a bit. However, a slightly bigger coaster allows you to charge the same or even more and can easily reach twice or thrice the throughput, or even higher. Sure, it costs a bit more to build, but that's only a one-time cost. Coasters do cost more to operate, but that's only about 200 per hour, which is the cost of 1 or 2 tickets per month, so that's pretty much nothing. This isn't to say that the go-karts isn't a good ride, but it is also not overpowered. One thing it is very good at is soaking up guests in pay-per-entry parks, but it is not better at that than a whole load of flat rides like the motion simulator, for example. In conclusion, the go-karts is by far the best ride out of all transport, gentle and thrill rides, but it doesn't reach the potential of a lot of coasters and some water rides. Now we have reached the point in the video where I show some efficient designs. This is a little bit different for the go-karts, as pretty much all you can do is make it longer or add some hills. This is the basic design that I would recommend. The length of the station determines how many cars you can get, and the rest is just getting back to the station as fast as possible. How long the station is depends a bit on what you want. A 12 tile station has the highest throughput, but it also makes the ride 14 tiles long, which can be a bit hard to fit in small parks. I think I would often go for a 5 or 6 tile station to get some extra cars, but also keep the size relatively small. To make the track more exciting, you could add some hills or make it longer by going back and forth 1 or more extra times. Longer tracks have a lower throughput but also give higher stats, meaning you can charge more. I personally only would use the shortest design, but if your park isn't very busy, it could be a good idea to add more laps or make the ride longer. That was it for this video. If you have any more questions about the go-karts, leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. In the description is a link to a calculator you can use to check how much you can charge for your rides. Thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next video.